What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down why tomorrow is going to be another very important day as we have huge data coming out, not to mention new developments on the charts. But just note that I am not a financial planner. Make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire community as a whole. Anyways, what's happening with the markets? We had another very, very crazy day today. Starting with yesterday, we had Nvidia's earnings, and Nvidia dumped like a rock. So did the markets. We saw the market dump really hard yesterday during the after hours. And then what happened was we saw a lot of buyers step in. So Nvidia went from being down 7% yesterday to being down only 2% at one point today. That means that we saw it go up by about 5% as some buyers ended up pushing it higher, but it wasn't really enough to turn it back into the green because then we got another big rejection and Nvidia made its way back down towards the lows. So it ended up closing down 6%. We dumped yesterday, we rebounded in the morning, then we dumped again, and the whole market followed that trend. You could see on SPY, we dumped yesterday after the market closed, and then we saw a big rebound today only to reject again at resistance. So the market is still in a very, very tight range. We're actually seeing the QQQ and SPY still range bound. And the question is now going to come as what's going to happen? Which way are we going to break? Now, whether we get some kind of break depends on lots of different factors, especially data. So I find it to be very important for me to go over the data first before I break down these charts in more details. And it all starts off with tomorrow. So tomorrow is going to be Friday, August 30th, 2024. And it's also the Friday before a long weekend because the market's going to be closed on Labor Day. We have a 3-day weekend coming up, and this is going to be the last Friday for the markets. So the question is what's happening 1 hour, okay, before the market ends up opening. We have the PCE data report coming out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is a very important data. This is the Fed's preferred inflationary measure, and it tends to be heavily dictated by CPI. Now, we're expecting the data to be very similar to what we got from before. So you can see the consensus in the forecast on the right side, and then what we got previously is right over here. We're basically expecting everything to be the same. So we'll see what ends up happening with PCE. That's going to be very, very huge, the first market moving catalyst. Then we have the Chicago PMI at 9:45 a.m., which is more minor, followed by at 10 o'clock a.m., 30 minutes after the market opens, we have the Michigan consumer sentiment data and more data coming out for the 5-year inflationary expectations. But the main time for volatility is going to be when we open. We're going to be looking for what the reaction is to all this data and also the PC release. So get ready for all of that. Now, one thing worth mentioning about PCE is that this is very dictated by CPI. And the last CPIs have been quite decent for the markets. That's what gave Jerome Powell a lot more conviction when it comes to talking about a cut. So I'm saying this not because I'm saying I 100% agree with all the data, not because I think all the data is real. I'm simply just saying this based off the data that we're being given, which we have to use when it comes to trading and looking at the markets. So if you look at CPI, we got the July reports, and just to double check, PC is going to be for the month of July. So we already got the CPI data for July, and that was quite decent. If you look at this on a month-over-month basis, so it was also quite decent, aligned with expectations. Everything was quite decent, so there's a good chance we're going to get a decent PCE. Now, just because data is decent, it does not necessarily mean the market's going to keep pumping. They could try another trick where they like to pump and dump things, and anything could really happen depending on what we see. For the options chain, as a reminder, okay, we basically have a little bit over 500,000 of these calls expiring, and we have over 1.5 million of these puts expiring. We have a 2.87 put to call ratio with a 548 being max pain. So if we were to lose critical support on SPY around that 555 area and we fail to hold it, we remain very bearish, I'd be looking at this as a potential target. But that's going to take a lot to cause the market to lose that support because that's a very, very strong support. So I just wanted to keep that as a reference. For the Fear and Greed Index, this is currently at greed. Greed is making up the majority of sentiments right now. We're seeing a lot of buyers stepping in. SPY and the QQQ did close in the green. And so far, greed is still present. Momentum is also quite greedy. And then when it comes to other things like the puts and call option ratio, this is starting to go up a little bit. We're starting to see a little bit more call buying. Puts are being closed, at least on the 5-day basis. This is not how many calls and puts there are overall. This is more like what are we seeing on average for the last 5 days. Over the last 5 days on average, we're starting to see a little bit more call buying than put buying. So this is shifting a little bit. And that's a little bit of a shift that we're seeing, at least when it comes to positioning. Besides that, volatility is still neutral for the markets. We're still waiting for a direction to unfold as long as we're range bound. And the last thing I want to briefly talk about is this. We We have the target rate probabilities at currently 67% of a chance for us to get a 25 basis point cut, and a 33% chance we get a 50 basis point cut. So the market's favoring a 25 basis point cut. Jerome Powell made that very clear, and he's basically implying to us that we're going to get a cut soon. So we're only about less than 3 weeks away from FOMC, maybe like 2.5 weeks. That's going to be very important too for the market. So we'll see how that goes. Anyways, that's pretty much it for my analysis on the data. So PC is going to be very big. It's going to be a big market moving catalyst. But considering the fact that CPI was all aligned with expectations, quite decent, there's a very, very good chance that PCE is going to be decent. The Fed has a lot of confidence in that, and that's going to cause a big move. Now, even if we do get a decent PCE, I think the odds would favor us attempting to rebound, of course, but there's a big but. There's no guarantee that the move is going to last forever, right? Just like how today we saw SPY pump only to dump because of technicals, that's also a very big factor. And now let's just talk about these levels. So, one thing worth mentioning about SPY is that we're still in a range. Every time we hit this like 562 to 563 area, SPY rejects. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rejections up here. So every time we hit 562 to 563, we've rejected so far over the last couple of weeks. However, almost every time we hit 555 to 556, we are seeing buyers defending SPY. The only exception was yesterday. We saw a dip a little bit below that because of Nvidia's earnings, only to rebound. So the question is, what's going to happen from here? I think that SPY is range bound right now, and there's a good chance PCE is going to be decent. So we might see a little rebound attempt, and then the market may dip again and just completely remain range bound for now. I find that to be very probable. Also, tomorrow is going to be the last trading day of August, so that's going to be very impactful for balance sheets. So we'll see if they try to hold the market up or not. So we're going to be looking at 559.22 as our first resistance. That's our 20 EMA, followed by 560. If we break 560, we're looking for 562 again, and then really tough resistance near 563. We have support to watch for at 558. If we lose that, we're going to be looking for 555, the entire range down there. And if that fails us, we're going to be looking for the lows to be retested near 553. That's where we tried to bounce off of during the dip on Nvidia yesterday. So what do I think is going to happen? What is my prediction about this? I have a feeling, and this is what my gut tells me. Honestly, I don't know what's going to happen for sure because it depends on the data, of course. So make sure you guys are prepared for that. I'm not a fortune teller. I don't always know what data is going to look like. But I presume that because of the fact that we had this low here and we were trying to make a higher low, and the fact that all the CPI reports were quite decent, I think there's a very, very good chance that this might lead to a rebound attempt. So I think there's a very good chance that we're going to be looking for that, a small rebound back up into like the 560 area. And I think that may also lead us to a temporary move before we end up seeing a dip as well. So with that being said, I think we're going to push a little bit in the morning after PC data comes out to 560. We may even get very close to the low 560s, but then as the day goes on, we might dip back down to the lows of the day and then continue to consolidate to close kind of flat. So I think that's what's going to most likely happen. I think we're not going to get as much volatility until next week, so we'll see how things go. But like I said before, if we were to lose 555 on SPY, we start to turn bearish. And if we break 563, we turn bullish. I presume we're just going to be stuck in the middle, kind of popping a little bit, then dipping. And I know people are talking about the head and shoulders that's developing on SPY. Well, don't solely trade based off of head and shoulders. We don't always know what's going to happen. So we'll see how things end up developing, at least for now. So with that being said, I just want to say that it's always important for us to be unbiased, and we'll have to see what kind of reactions we get. But look for a pop and drop tomorrow with with all the data that came out. On top of this, I just want to say that for Nvidia, we look a little bit more bearish, especially considering the fact that we're making lower highs right over here. We're going to be looking at this critical support at 117. If we lose that, we're looking for 115, then eventually a bigger drop if 115 fails us to then balance around this 111 area. For resistance, we're going to be looking at 120 and then 122.64. I think tomorrow we're going to try to rebound off our 200 EMA very close to about the 120 area. Then we might get a rejection and continue to dip lower. This trend in this chart is looking a little bit more bearish to me. It might rebound a bit then start dipping, and I still see a risk of some downside based off how weak it's been over the last few days. Look for a pop and drop on Nvidia. For Bitcoin, we pushed all the way up to about 61,000 only to reject, but we're still range bound. Every time we hit the 58,000 area, we'd like to bounce. Every time we hit 61,000, we're kind of rejecting. It's been like that for the last 3 days, but that's going to be very important, at least for us to watch. So I think we're going to be rebound. We're going to rebound tomorrow, and we're not going to be worrying too much about it. It might rebound a bit, then we might be looking for a dip. So it's just going to likely trade sideways. For ES, it's the same thing as SPY essentially. I mean, we have a head and shoulders like structure that could technically lead to downside, but I wouldn't solely trade based off of them because they could be traps sometimes. For confirmation of us dipping, you want to see us lose the 5580 area. If we end up losing that, we don't hold above that for 2 straight days. I expect a big drop to be coming. Now, with the head and shoulders, you want to be very, very careful. I think that tomorrow we could still rebound thanks to the PC data report. We could retest the 5560 area, get very, very close. I'm sorry, the 5640 area. I don't know what I just said, 5640. And then we could end up dipping after that. So I think there's going to be a little pop and drop like move. And I think they may not cause the market to crash unless we get some like bad news. They may not cause a big crash because of all the options expiring. So we'll see how it goes. For Tesla, we're looking bearish overall, and I say this just based off price action. We had a high here, we came down, made a lower high, came down, made a lower high, and we're continuing to reject. Now, for individual levels, to turn back up, you want to break past 212, and to be bearish, you want to see it lose 202. I presume that what's going to happen to Tesla is we push tomorrow into this like trend line of resistance. Then we hit this 210 area, we might reject back down lower and start dipping down to 205, if not 202. So I'll be watching to see if that ends up being the case. So we will see how things end up developing. So that's going to be very important. We could pop and drop, and we'll see if that ends up being the case. For others out there, we also have NQ. NQ is range bound. Notice that when we hit this 19,700 area, we reject, and we like to get bought back up around the low 19,000s. But overall, the trend is a little bit more bearish as we're making lower highs. So I think tomorrow there could be a rebound attempt for that 19,500 area near our 50 EMA. If we break that, we go a little bit higher. If we reject it, we might be coming back down. Look for a bounce off PC, then possibly a rejection if we establish a lower high. If we don't break the high at 19,700, I anticipate we're going to pop a bit, then start dipping lower, all the way back down to the lows we saw during Nvidia's earnings. So I think we may pop and drop as the most likely possibility. Same thing with the QQQ, which is still technically range bound. We have resistance now at 472 and also at 474. Our main support's at 468. We could attempt to push a little bit higher than reject again. And I think there might be a test of 468 coming again. So I think we might push a little higher into like the closer to about 474 or so. And then we might be looking for a rejection. So I'll be watching to see if that ends up being the case. For Aapl, Aapl also has a very, very interesting structure. We're trying to hold above that 230 area. If we do hold that, we're looking for 232. If we lose that, we're going to be looking for it to all the way down to about 228, followed by lower levels like this gap fill. So I do want to note that this gap is very distinctive. We have this nice gap below, and it is possible we will return down there if the market does get a dip. Now, we did push only to reject a bit, so there is some weakness building there. I think tomorrow we're going to attempt to push back up towards these highs, and then there might be a rejection again, very similar to what we saw today for a dip. And if we continue to close below 230, there's going to be a bigger drop, but we have to wait and see for confirmation. For Palantir, we rebounded as Nvidia got bought back up, and we're actually holding up nicely. If we hold above 30.8, we're going to be looking for a move back up to about 31.6. And if we lose 30.8, we're going to be looking for a dip all the way down to at least 30.5, followed by much lower levels. We might rebound towards these resistance levels and start dipping back down as the most likely possibilities. I presume that's the most likely possibility for us. So I like the structure here. Look for a push tomorrow morning and see how well we hold up. 31.5 is likely coming, if not higher, and then we'll see if we get a rejection or not. But look for a little bit of a push to start us off. Supermicro dropped really hard, but it is forming a bullish divergence. So as long as we're above 400, we are favoring a move back down towards uh, basically the 475 area. And if that breaks, we could get very close to about 500. If you reject, you're going to be looking for this support at 425. If that fails, this 400 is coming. I think what's going to happen is we're going to try to rebound towards 475 for a little bit of a bounce, and then we'll see if we reject or not, depending on the data. For Rivian, we pushed only to reject. We got a very bearish looking candlestick that formed right here. I think what's going to happen to Rivian is we may do something similar to what we saw, a couple of days ago, where we try to rebound a little bit to that 14.2 area, and then we reject and come back down to 13.92. So that's what I find to be the most likely possibility, a little pop and drop like move, and we'll see how we end up reacting from here moving forward. For SoFi, we have a nice looking accumulation structures, nice inverse head and shoulders. We're trying to hold around this 8 area, so we're looking very bullish. If we hold above 8, our next target is to be all the way up towards 8.3, then 8.5. If we lose 8, we're going to be dipping back down to about 7.83. So we'll see if this holds. We are starting to slow a little bit, but I think it may attempt to push tomorrow morning. We could be retesting 8.13, and we'll see if it rejects and comes back down to 8. But for now, it looks like it might push a little bit for the time being. For the IWM Russell 2000, we're trying to hold this trend line right over here. As long as we're above that, we are favoring the upwards direction. So look at the big white trend line that's kind of like holding us up. We bounced off this many, many times. So if we hold the trend line, we're going to be slowly pushing for the 220 area, 221 area or above that. And if we lose the trend line, we're going to be looking for a move back down to about 216. I favor that this is going to continue to uptrend, slowly push our way up to 221. I find that to be more probable. For AMD, the 4 hours looking a little bit more bullish. We want to break past 148 to push up to 151. If we reject, we'll be looking for a dip back down towards 142.8. But in my personal opinion, I think that we do have a tendency of kind of rejecting at resistance. We could rebound to about 148, then reject, and we might be looking for a move back down to this imbalance. So I think a pop and drop is looking more favorable. For ARM is basically kind of rejecting off these key levels. We popped and dropped, popped and dropped, popped and dropped. If we reclaim 136, we're going to be looking for a push for 140. And if we end up losing 129, look for a dip back down to 125. I think tomorrow is going to try to push a little bit higher, try to get back up to about 135, and we'll see if you reject or not off of that. So look for a little rebound and a continuation lower to 129. We might pop and drop. For Coinbase, we're looking a little bit more bearish because we got this huge rejection over the last couple of days, and we've been dipping since. We even attempted to rebound a bit yesterday, only to reject again. So that makes me say that look at 192 as resistance. If we get above that, we're looking for 196. And if we end up losing support at 188, we're looking for a dip. This might test 188 tomorrow. If it does not hold, expect a dump to about 183, followed by the gap fill down here. So the 4 hour looks a little bit more bearish. It is favoring downside a little bit more, especially where these imbalances happen to be. For Amzn's in a very, very critical area. We have resistance at 174.5. If that breaks, I see us going up to about 176. And if we don't break that, we're looking for a retest of 170, not to mention 168. I presume we're going to pop a little bit and try to retest the 174 area. And if we don't break it, we might be coming back down towards 169. So look for a pop and drop as a strong possibility. And also the trend is more bearish as we're making lower highs right now. So it may pop and drop again, and it's still looking a little bit weaker. Meta has a very, very similar looking structure. I think that for the time being, we could be making lower highs. I also want to note that we have this resistance to watch for at this 520 area and also at 524. And if we end up losing support at around 516, we're looking for essentially 512, not to mention 509. So from how I see things, we have a bearish divergence that developed on Meta. And since then, we've been actually downtrending. So notice that we have a high here, we reject, have a high, we reject, had a high, and we're starting to reject a little bit. So we got to reclaim 520 to turn back up. I think we're going to be testing the 521 area tomorrow. And then if we reject, I'm going to be looking for a move back down towards 516. So I'm thinking it's not looking that great. Look for a little attempt to get back above 521. If we don't hold it, we're going to be looking for a move back down. For Microsoft is not looking that great. We have a tendency of kind of popping and dropping. We popped and dropped multiple times. I personally think that there's a good chance that we may retest 415. And if we reject, we're going to be looking for a move back down to 410. If we break this, we're going to be looking for basically 419. But in my opinion, we may pop and drop and dip a little bit lower. So watch for that very carefully on Microsoft. For Google, we're making lower highs. We had this high here, came down, made a lower high, came down, made a lower high, and then we ended up coming down. So we need to reclaim 166 to turn back up. Otherwise, we're at risk of dipping lower towards this wick at 162. So I think the odds are favoring us kind of pushing it, but then dipping it to 162. Google looks a little bit weaker for now. We may pop it with the PC data, and then we'll see how things go. So that's what I find to be the most likely possibility. That's what I predict is going to happen. But I don't know for sure. It depends on the data, of course. So always be open-minded when it comes to that. For a few more, let me just go over a couple more. DJT is still looking bearish. We're just barely shuffling around the 20 area. We might retest 21 tomorrow, and then we could reject. But look for an attempt to get to 21. We'll see if it breaks that or not. It might reject as the trend is more bearish. The VIX has dumped again. We popped a bit to fill the gap only to come back down. and remains in a very, very tight consolidation phase. It could dip a little bit more to this imbalance, which suggests to me that the market may try to push a little higher, but then we'll watch and see if the VIX gets a bounce. As of right now, I'm not seeing that. It looks like this might dip a little bit lower. We also have this gap below to fill. So perhaps the market's going to push a little bit higher tomorrow morning, and then maybe the VIX will bounce later to fill this gap again. And that could signify that the market is going to try to dip a little bit. We're not really there yet, so we just have to wait and see. The 10 year is going to react to the data. If we get a decent PC, this might dip a little bit, which could be good for the markets. And then the dollar is also starting to push right here. We'll see if we continue to break out. We dipped a little bit only to rebound. If we keep going, we could be looking for a retest of 102. If it does start pushing higher, that could be bearish for the markets. We're starting to form like an inverse head and shoulders. So this might dip a little bit to the 20 EMA. If it dips like that, that could signify the market's going to push a little higher. But then if we get a bounce off the inverse head and shoulders and start pushing higher for the uptrend, that could once again cause a little bit of a shift right over here. So I'll be watching to see if that ends up being the case. But anyways, that's pretty much it for my video. Get ready for tomorrow. It's going to be a very important day. SPY is range bound, but we'll see which way we end up breaking. As of right now, we're still in a range. So we're going to be waiting very, very patiently, very, very meticulously, and give the market the time it needs. So that being said, get ready for the PCE data report coming out for tomorrow. I'll be talking about that in more detail tomorrow morning. Until then, have a great day, night, or evening, wherever you guys are around the world. I appreciate you guys so much for listening, and peace out.